you and the chicken is probably going to be healthier and live longer. If they're somewhat enclosed, we change it a little bit, but they are, obviously very much, pasture raised and truly free ranging. We really want to take it, to the next level and make sure we raise at least 80% of the food we consume. Get your deficiency fixed up and then worry about, okay, can I, dial it back? You mentioned before, anemia. So by putting heart and spleen together, you get 48% of your daily iron. And I would say the rule is to supplement as little as possible and get most of your nutrients from, whole foods.
Welcome to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast, where we meet the world's top experts to explore the secrets of health, mindset, longevity, and so much more. Are you ready to take charge of your existence and biohack your life? This show is for you. Please keep in mind, we're not dispensing medical advice and are not responsible for any outcomes you may experience from implementing the tactics lying herein. Are you ready? Let's do this. Welcome back to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast. Oh my goodness, friends. I have been wanting to do an episode on organ supplements for so long, and I could not have found a better guest for the topic than Michael Coomer. He is so awesome, and like we talk about in the episode, he lives in my part of town here in Georgia. And what I really loved in the beginning of this conversation is learning all about his homesteading lifestyle. It is so cool. You will learn so much about what it's like to raise your own animals. I learned so much about raising turkeys and chickens and geese and bees and growing your own plants and using tomatoes to kill insects and installing solar panels for solar energy. It's really inspiring. So many things. I feel like I need to get into the homesteading world now. And of course, we also talk all about organ supplementation, what types you should be taking, what issues they can help, how much to supplement. Should you actually supplement as little as possible? We talk about how he created his supplements and the special thing about the natural ratios in his MK supplements, which are grass-fed beef organ supplements, which, by the way, if you'd like to purchase your own, you can use the coupon code MelanieAvalon. That will get you 15% off site-wide at his site, shop.michaelcoomer.com. It will also get you free shipping on orders over $100. So that is shop.michaelcoomer.com. Use the coupon code MelanieAvalon for 15% off. And of course, we also have a really intelligent, thought-provoking conversation about the whole vegan debate when it comes to killing animals and using them for food. For example, we talk about how one cattle can actually last a family 1.5 years with meat, which is crazy. The show notes for today's episode will be at melanieavalon.com/organ supplements. Those show notes will have a full transcript as well as links to everything that we talked about, so definitely check that out. Definitely let me know what you think of this episode in my Facebook group, IF Biohackers, Intermittent Fasting plus Real Foods plus Life. Comment on the pinned post to enter to win something that I love. And then check out my Instagram, find the Friday announcement post, and again, comment there to enter to win something that I love. All right, I think that's all the things. As a brief reminder, you can get 15% off site-wide at shop.michaelcoomer.com with the coupon code MelanieAvalon, as well as free shipping on orders over $100. And without further ado, please enjoy this wonderful interview with Michael Coomer. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the show. I am so incredibly excited about the conversation that I am about to have. So the backstory on today's conversation, I have aired a episode with a fabulous guest, Forrest Smith. He's the founder of a company called Kinneon that makes a red light laser device, which is so cool. Definitely check out that episode. But in any case, he introduced me quite a while ago now. We were just talking about how long it's been to the incredible Michael Coomer, who is the founder of MK Supplements. And Michael actually lives in Atlanta like I do, which is so cool. He's also the founder of the healthy living blog, michaelcoomer.com, which talks about all things health and wellness, which is also really incredible and amazing. And so we did a call, it was a while ago now. I was so excited because his MK supplements line makes grass-fed, 100% pasture-raised cattle organ supplements. And I historically have taken organ supplements for, on and off for years. And I've been dying to do an episode on it. And I really wanted to, dive deep into all the questions that I have and do it with somebody who's making really high quality versions of that I can 100% endorse. And when I did a call with Michael, it was just so incredible because he just had all the answers to all the things and just knew all about this. And I also actually asked listeners for questions as well. So we have so much that we can dive into in today's episode. And it's super cool because Michael also lives in Atlanta like me, and he actually operates a suburban homestead with animals like beehives and chickens. And is that where you still live, Michael?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we actually purchased some property earlier this year, so we'll move probably maybe next year or so to expand our homestead. But yes, we still have rabbits, geese, chickens, bees, and are having a blast with it.
Did you have to train how to handle the beehive? Do you guys handle that yourself?
I mean, it is obviously trial and error, and a lot of learning in the beginning. But it's not really it's not rocket science. I mean, you watch a couple of YouTube videos and you think you know what you're doing, and then you do it, and then you figure out you actually don't. And you learn and get the hang of it. So it's been fun.
Wow. And all of those different animals, do you raise them for food as well? Like geese, for example. Like, do you have like a Christmas goose? Like in
Yes, but not the geese. The geese are actually guard geese. So they are meant to alert and protect, predominantly against aerial predators, but against really anything that comes on the property unannounced. But yes, we do eat chickens. We are about to start raising turkeys this year for Thanksgiving. So that'll be for food. The rabbits are for food. And, the honey from the bees obviously is. But the chickens have been, for the most part, for eggs. But in exactly a month, we are going to get our first batch of what's called meat birds. So those are the ones that will end up in our freezer.
Oh, wow. This is just so interesting. And so rabbit meat, that's like very, very lean, right?
Yes, there is not a whole lot of fat on a rabbit. That is correct. So you need to fry it or whatever you do with a lot of butter or tallow or whatever you like. But yes.
Is it a red meat or a white meat?
It is a red meat. So they're not ruminants. It's red meat, much like, cattle. It's actually, taste-wise, it's fairly comparable to chicken meat, but it's red.
Have you been to the restaurant Canoe here in Atlanta?
I like to think so because the name is very familiar. I think we went there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I really like it because they have rabbit. They have all this different game meat. Like they have kangaroo on the menu. But I've actually never I always want to try the rabbit, but I haven't because they can't make it without whatever like pre-seasoning sauce thing that they have. And I like to go, au natural. So and now I'm inspired. I want to live on with all of this stuff. One last question about this, I swear. So the chickens, do they lay eggs every single day?
I mean, on average, we have now 35 hens, egg-laying hens, and we get, on average, I want to say somewhere between 25 to 30 eggs a day. In summer, it's a little bit more. In winter, it's usually a little bit less because there's less light, and that seems to influence their egg-laying potential. But on average, you can say one egg per chicken per day.
Actually, I do have more questions. And the turkeys that you're going to raise, do you raise a lot of them or a few? Because don't they get very large and like intense?
They do get very large. I mean, they are, obviously much like with the chickens or the turkeys that you buy in the store, those are the breeds that I don't necessarily recommend. Like in the chicken world, it would be the Cornish cross. They are, from birth to butcher, it's 45 days or so. So they're basically, you're eating a fat baby, an overweight baby that can't walk anymore at the end of its lifespan. And so those are not the type of chickens that we raise here. And with the turkeys, it's the same. I mean, we raise heritage breeds. They're not the ones that double-breasted, big babies that are, that grow very fast and are usually very unhealthy and can't even reproduce themselves anymore. So we grow, slower growing birds, but they still obviously are significantly bigger than chickens. And so we'll get 10 for our first trial run to see how it goes. And if it's successful, because a lot of people have already asked us, hey, can we buy, then whatever you don't use, can we buy from you for Thanksgiving? And so we're considering doing that.
Oh my goodness. I want to buy one.
And put you on the list.
Okay. How do I want to be on this list. Oh, wow. And the land, is this all just like free flowing? Like, are they all just out there doing their thing?
I mean, pretty much they're obviously pasteurized, but they are, fenced in. I mean, they have about half of, I want to say they have between, depending in winter, they have a little bit less because there's nothing growing anyway. But in summer, they have about half an acre for those, 30, 40 birds or so, where they can roam around and do their thing. But the thing is with chickens, I mean, in the beginning, we had them like just, running all over. There was no limitation whatsoever. But as, then they come up the stairs, on the porch, they poop everywhere. And so it gets old really quick, and you realize you really want to, fence them in somewhere where, they can do their thing, they can destroy whatever they can poop, they can, fertilize. But in the area where we are, I don't want to walk barefoot and then step on, in chicken poop every second step. And so we changed it a little bit, but they are, obviously very much, pasture raised and truly free ranging.
Is this something people could do if they don't have a lot of land? Like, could they have like a chicken, or do you really have to commit to having a bigger space?
Yeah, I mean, one chicken I would not recommend because they're a flock animal, so they get sad, if they're by themselves. But if you have like, maybe two, three, or four, you can definitely do that. And in fact, I would even recommend for various reasons. I mean, it's the most idyllic, way of looking at it. If the chickens are just, on pasture and roaming around wherever they want to. But the truth is, I think you and the chicken is probably going to be healthier and live longer if they're, somewhat enclosed, like in a chicken tractor, maybe, where you can still be on pasture and you would move the tractor every single day. So they always have free access, to pasture and to the grubs and worms, whatever they want to forage. And they fertilize the lawn without destroying it completely, because if you leave them in one spot for too long, they mess everything up and they oversaturate the soil with the manure. You don't want that. So by having them in a tractor, they're protected from predators, especially hawks. We had plenty of, hawk kills because they are free roaming. And so especially if you only have 4 chickens, and 2 get killed, that's a severe loss. If we have 40 and 2 get killed, it's okay, And so I would, really, if you have not a lot of space, I would consider either doing something with deep littering, where the manure is not going to become a problem, or just some mobile solution where you can move them around, on a small patch of lawn, and you just, keep rotating them around.
Do you have issues with coyotes?
No, not where we live. I mean, everything is fenced in. So we have a fairly strong perimeter fence that, prevents or at least deters larger land-based predators from coming in. We deal mostly with aerial predators here.
Have you ever considered, or would you ever get like cattle?
Yeah, that was the reason why we purchased 45 acres in the northwestern part of the state. So we can do, the whole 9 yards, including, dairy cows, beef, obviously, pigs, and anything in between, really. So we really want to take it, to the next level and make sure we raise at least 80% of the food we consume and pretty much all the protein we consume, by ourselves, knowing where the stuff is coming from and how the animals were treated and raised and everything and butchered. So that's the plan.
So like one cow, how many steaks does it make? Or like how long will it last?
Yeah, so that's the thing with a cow. There are only so many ribeyes and so many briskets, in one cow. But it also depends on how thick you cut them, etc. But on average, if you have a good well raised cow, you probably get somewhere around 450 pounds of meat, all types of different cuts. But if you eat steak every day, you'll run, as a family in particular, you'll run out of steak really quick. So you need to learn and appreciate, all the other less exciting cuts, all the roasts and the ground meat, etc. But yeah, I mean, we go through 1.5 cows every year here, among the 4 of us.
But still, so 1.5 cows lasts your whole family the entire year. See, it's so interesting because they bring on people of all different perspectives on this show. And so I bring on a lot of people in the vegan camp. And I just find it really interesting, the arguments and that ideologies surrounding harming life, when just listening to you right now, it's like, holistically raising one cow can feed your entire family for, a year and a half, compared to all of the deforestation and all of the, killing of like rodents and insects and everything that happens with clearing land for, plant-based agriculture. It's just really eye-opening to me.
I tell you what, I mean, we eat a lot of meat. We are, animal-based predominantly, but we do eat plants as well, veggies, fruits, etc. And we have our veggie garden. And I can tell you, there is no way around killing living things and, animals, insects, what have you, if you want to be successful growing plants. And I would argue that it's not only more complex and more time consuming growing, the amount of protein and fat in particular that we consume than, doing it with animals. And, I don't know how often, and especially just to give you one simple example, tomatoes, if you have a nice tomato plant, it's not going to take very long until you have caterpillars, on the tomato plant. And so what are you going to do? You either let the caterpillar, eat the plant and you have no harvest, or you relocate the caterpillar, but that's not really sustainable because they're going to come back. Or what we do is we feed the caterpillars to the chickens. And so we are by being able to, or by, if we want to eat tomatoes, we have to kill insects to make that happen. And the insects that we are not eating, at least when I harvest a chicken, I eat the chicken. I eat the animal that I kill, instead of just having, collateral damage as part of my, growing food. And so that's something that I think is forgotten a lot. And that's only on a small scale. I mean, we have the ability to pick individual caterpillars from our, couple of tomato plants. And, we spend a couple of minutes every morning to do that. But if in a big operation, where they just plow through, I mean, it's not only caterpillars that are killed by seeding, by spraying, by harvesting. And even, if it's organic and everything, organic doesn't mean no spraying is involved. It just means, that with what they spray is organically certified. But if that's, a pesticide, it kills pests, including, again, insects and probably rodents as well. And so there is just no way around killing animals. And, I think it's human nature that, we are meant to kill and consume animals. And we can also do that same with plants, but doing that exclusively, I don't think is good for your health. And B, it's not gonna avoid killing animals, So the whole argument, I think, falls apart very quickly if you ever try to survive, on plants that you grow. Even if you're the most skillful, gardener, whatever, you're gonna realize very quickly what it involves, and that the ideology behind, pure plant-based diets doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I'm just so fascinated by this whole conversation. And I mean, I haven't done any of this, so I'm speaking from behind, not really having the experience. Like you just said, it just seems like the argument falls apart really fast. Like it just seems so simple to me. Wow. Okay, this is inspiring. I think listeners can see why you're so cool. And I had to have you on the show. So your supplement line, so before that, when you have the cattle, the organ meats from the cattle, will you be eating all of those with your family? Do your kids like organs?
Our kids like the freeze-dried version. Even though I would say my younger one, he's now 8, but when he was 5, we did like a blind tasting, just, cover your eyes, and then we would consume different organ meats, including, testicles and heart and liver and spleen, and he would eat all of them. And, he was fine. I mean, it's not that it was his favorite food, but it was not like, oh, I'm disgusted by whatever I just ate. Now, of course, that he's older and he kind of, knows what that is and where it comes from, etc. He's a little bit more skirmish. Actually, right now he's in a very picky phase of eating. But the kids generally prefer the freeze-dried version. It doesn't taste like anything. And no taste, no texture. But yes, I do. My wife is the same. She goes with the kids and just pops a couple of pills and be done with it. But I prefer fresh organs when I have access to them. And yes, we will then. Between the dog and I, we have a German Shepherd, and he's on a raw food diet. So he only eats meat, organs, bones, egg yolks, and occasionally, some plant matter that he either finds outside or that, we gave him, I don't know, add some raspberries from the garden or whatever into his meat bowl. But between him and I, we do eat, and we will eat the organs.
That's so interesting that your son, so even though in the beginning he was being raised without an apparent aversion to it, that still seeped in, I guess, from culture. Like, I just wonder where it comes from, the aversion.
I think it's, he talks to, they're homeschooled now, but, at the time, in school, he says, hey, I ate liver and everything. Why would you eat that? And so I think it's very much influenced, but also, it's the thing here is, if I have to pick between a ribeye and liver, I prefer the ribeye. There is no question about that. I just, see food and, slightly different than maybe I did 10 years ago. If I look at, junk food, for me, I see poison. So I don't crave those things anymore, even stuff that I would have craved in the past. But now if you, put a, Happy Meal in front of me, I would not touch it, period. But that's because I've changed my, how I see that. And I think with him it's the same, and especially when he grew up. I mean, there are so many foods that I didn't like when I was a kid, and then I liked them, or vice versa. I mean, I remember our daughter, she used to eat, olives when she was 2, and spoonfuls of minced garlic and weird stuff that I'm like, how on earth would a 2-year-old, eat that? Now she doesn't like it anymore. Back then she did. So, taste and preferences obviously change over time, and I'm sure, whatever they're going through now is not going to be the last thing. And so it's ever evolving. But I think our environment has a lot to do with the foods that we gravitate towards and the ones that we think are, not good.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by this question for so long, primarily because after I cleaned up my diet and was eating, all whole foods and everything like that, and I even had a point in time where I was really anemic. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, I'm only eating whole foods. I'm anemic. I'm going to try, because I had never tried liver like by itself. I'd actually eaten it a lot growing up. My grandmother was German, kind of similar to your kids. She would feed us liver, and I loved it until I realized what it was. And then I got a little bit grossed out. That wasn't like whole liver. It was like the liverwurst, which is not the same thing. But in any case, I remember, so when I was in that period of time where I was anemic and had been eating whole foods, I was like, I'm going to try some liver. And in theory, it's going to taste amazing because I only eat whole foods now and I'm anemic. I should love this stuff. And I tried it and I was like, this is disgusting. And and I just remember thinking it seemed like I should have gone beyond any cultural influence in my mind, but my body didn't like it. And I've always had different theories about that. I wonder if maybe the overnutrition in the organs, maybe the body doesn't want to be oversaturated in fat soluble vitamins, or I don't know. I have a lot of theories about that. I don't know if you have theories about, can we eat too many organs, I guess is a question. I'll just read Jessica's question because it's kind of similar. She said, if the idea of nose to tail eating is to mimic ancestral eating patterns, there's a relatively small amount of liver relative to meat on an animal. So how often should we consume organs? Are there concerns of toxicity if taken too often?
It's a very, very valid question and an argument for those who say that we shouldn't be consuming that too much. But I think if you were truly following a nose to tail diet, then the size of the animal and its organs and muscle, meat, etc. would determine how much you're eating, and maybe the size of your tribe. Yes, there is certainly a limit. I mean, I would not recommend consuming 2 pounds of liver every single day, just because a little bit is good, more is better. I've not seen any real life cases of vitamin toxicity stemming from real food. I've seen and heard about them from synthetic vitamins. So it's definitely a thing, but I've yet to meet anyone who has consumed significant amounts of organs and then had any issues, because of that. I mean, maybe unless you consume the liver of a polar bear, which is significantly more, let's say, vitamin A, for example, than, the liver of a ruminant animal. But beyond that, I don't think there is a concern with consuming an ounce of liver a day, let's say, or the equivalent of, 3 grams of freeze-dried beef organ capsules, which would contain roughly the same amount of micronutrients as an ounce of fresh liver, So within that realm, I don't think there is any issue, even if you eat twice as much or 3 times as much. I don't think there is any issue whatsoever. But then on the other side, I was fortunate enough recently to be part of, a cow butchering, to learn the ropes once we get to that point. And I can tell you, the liver of a grown cow is humongous. I mean, even a large family would eat a long time from that one liver. The heart is humongous, and then obviously, it gets smaller and smaller. But, the point is that it's not just, it's, an ounce of liver in the cow and, and 400 pounds of muscle meat. It's not quite I think that the liver of a cow weighs 11 pounds or so. And then you get maybe, with bones, 400 pounds of meat and bones. If you remove the bones, it might be, maybe 400, 350 pounds. So there is a difference, but it's not 1 to 100 or so ratio. And so that's my take on it. I mean, and for the average American, or even for the health conscious American, I would argue we are still deficient in many of the micronutrients found in organs or in meat or in animals in general, that worrying about eating too much if you're deficient is not the right, you're not focusing on the right thing. Get your deficiency fixed up and then worry about, okay, can I, dial it back? Can I maybe go on a maintenance, dosage or whatever? Can I do it only twice a week or whatever the case might be? But having that as your first concern, I think is misguided.
That's, so fascinating. So not in supplement form, but I've heard that heart steak tastes similar to other steak cuts. Have you had a heart steak?
Yes. I mean, heart is a muscle, so it tastes very much like muscle meat. And I would even argue that, because it's a muscle, you can't really overeat heart. The liver, obviously is, and even though, the heart has also, a ton of specific micronutrients, some of which are specific to the heart muscle. But I think the overconsumption is more a concern maybe with liver and some of those organs and not so much with heart. But yeah, heart tastes, I mean, you can tell it's not ribeye because it's probably or ideally less fatty. But if you close your eyes and you eat heart muscle, most people, I would argue, could not tell what type of meat it is. They think it's some sort of meat.
I really want to try one. I keep hoping that I'll be at a restaurant and they'll have one on the menu, but I don't know where to get that. Do hormones build up in the organs at all? Andrea wanted to know about that. She also wanted to know specifically in supplements, which we can talk more about, but she was wondering about, are there concerns about hormones and also things like the thyroid? She wanted to know, could the animal hormones harm ours, like our thyroid?
Right. Yeah. Good question. So, let's tackle the first question first because there is this misconception that, liver and the kidneys, they're like the filters kind of, that filter the blood and remove toxins, but they don't work like a sieve where, all the toxins then accumulate in the liver. It works differently. In reality, those toxins get deactivated and then just move on and get flushed out, and then excreted via, your feces, your urine, your sweat, what have you. But they don't stay in the organ. So eating liver, you're going to get the same amount of toxins as from muscle meat. And, obviously, depending on how the cow lived, if it consumed, I don't know, grass that was contaminated with, certain toxins or even heavy metals from the soil or what have you, it's unavoidable that you're going to get some, even in the most well-raised cattle. That's, and the same with plants, by the way, there's no difference. I mean, any food that we grow in our environment is contaminated to varying degrees. And usually if it's in a well-raised cattle, those, it's minimally and nothing to be concerned about, but there is no higher concentration in organs than it is in muscle meat. And in retrospect, or then going into the second question, related question, what about hormones? Well, if the animal was injected with hormones, there is the argument to be made that some of those hormones then can, or its metabolites, can end up and remain in the meat and then get into your body. And the easiest way to fix that is, to consume meat from animals that were not raised with, or treated with antibiotics, at least not. I mean, there are some medical emergencies, obviously, when the animal has to be treated. But, the proactive treatment because of poor diet, feeding them grain and then counteracting with antibiotics to prevent, bacteria growing, obviously that part, I would avoid the meat from those animals. But beyond that, I don't think there is a concern. In fact, I would argue that, there is this thought that like supports like. So meaning that, if you consume liver, then all the nutrients that your own liver requires, including hormones and peptides and vitamins and minerals, you get from that organ that you consume. And so you indirectly support your own liver or organ. So I think there is an argument to be made for that, but I have not seen any evidence that any type of hormone in the animal's organ has a negative impact on your own hormone levels. In contrary, actually, there are a lot of reports that consuming, for example, beef testicles, which have testosterone and some of the other sex hormones, can actually help boost your own levels. So I've seen the positive impact, but not yet the negative impact.
You don't have like thyroid or adrenal or testicle supplements that you sell right now, right?
Not yet. So, the testicles, that's actually one of the products that I'd like to launch relatively soon, ideally this year, because there's a lot of demand. And I think, obviously, in particular with men, but the same applies to a different degree to women as well. Low testosterone levels across the board that have been declining for decades now. So that's something that I'm really interested in. Thyroid is a little bit of a sticky topic. I'd like to have a thyroid product, but it's incredibly difficult to market. On Amazon, you can't sell anything with thyroid. Google and Meta. So if you want to, do ads and stuff, they prevent you from doing that. I don't know what it is about the thyroid in particular that nobody likes, but it's difficult to market, especially for a small company. I mean, some of the larger brands can do it because they already have the reach. But for us, who rely on organic search and, on being found, if people search for stuff like that, it's a challenge. At some point, I'd like to have a thyroid, and adrenal product as well.
Well, it's so interesting. I never thought about this, but thyroid is the one where it's called thyroid and it creates thyroid hormones. Like I bet if the testicles were called testosterone and they created testosterone, you would probably have the same issues.
It would be the same story, probably. Yeah, I agree.
Well, going into your company more, so how long have you had MK Supplements?
Years go by so quickly, but if I'm not mistaken, we launched 2021, July of 2021.
Wow. So, I mean, it's such a big endeavor. And I know for me, having my own supplement line, everything that goes into that, but I feel like there's just so much more with I have so many questions here. I feel like there's a lot of, I don't want to say controversy surrounding animal supplements, but I feel like there probably is a lot to deal with that. So how did you determine your sourcing originally?
Yeah, that was really the reason why we launched significantly later than I wanted to, because I had issues finding sources that would meet all of my quality criteria. It's very easy, and there are if you just Google for, hey, I want to do beef liver supplements, beef liver powder, you find plenty of stuff, but it's usually heat dried instead of freeze dried. It's defatted instead of undefatted, and defatting usually requires hexane, a harsh chemical to remove the fat, which I don't know why you would want to remove the fat, probably because fat is bad is still a thing, even though it's 2024. And then sourced from either domestic cattle, which is not a bad thing per se, but up until now I have not found a good source of domestic cattle. And then the flip side to that also is that here in the United States, most cattle, or really, anywhere in the country, they have to eat hay in winter, whereas in New Zealand, where we source from, and many of the other, premium brands source from as well, the cattle can graze 24/7, 365, days a year because of the climate and the temperatures. And so, finding then someone who, can actually, source, or first of all, manufacture the products the way we want, without fillers, without flow agents, which is another big headache. We figured out, then, accommodate glass bottles and metal lids instead of plastic. That was another thing that I didn't think was an issue. And then, just the source, finding the right sources from New Zealand. And all of that, because I was completely new to the supplements industry. Maybe someone, who has been doing business in this area for a decade could have told me immediately, but I didn't know anyone. And, I couldn't, call Ancestral and say, hey, where do you guys source your supplements from? I want to do that too. And so that was, the limiting factor. And so that took me a while to kind of, connect all the dots and then find a supply chain that works for us.
Have you been to where you get yours from?
No, I've not been to New Zealand. No, that's on the bucket list. But I'm actually in discussions with the first serious ranching outfit and freeze drying outfit here in the United States to potentially also source locally, and so we don't have to fly the ingredients halfway around the world. And especially then, with bison, one could argue, bison, buffalo, those are like the native, those are like the stuff that our ancestors would have eaten, and not, domestic cattle. And so that's something I'm looking forward to incorporating into our portfolio.
That's exciting. I actually have an interview upcoming with a bison farm here in the US. And I was just briefly talking to her. I was fascinated there was so much I didn't know about bison. So I'm like looking forward to that conversation. So how did you decide, which different supplements to feature? And I think when we talked on the phone, you were talking a little bit about the uniqueness of your blend specifically. So how did you make those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, the first one was really a no-brainer. I think, liver is, if you only consume one organ, make it liver. I think has the most nutrient-dense single food there is. And so that made a lot of sense, in particular because there was no competitor that offered the product in glass with only liver at a reasonable price. And so that for us was like, a niche that we wanted to go after and just offer something that's, as budget friendly as it can be, where you get the most bang for your buck, basically. So that was the first supplement. And then starting with the second one, I came up with this huge matrix of all the organs and their micronutrient composition. And I tried to figure out, okay, what is complementary to liver that makes sense putting together? And then, I also asked, our customers at the time and asked what they wanted to get. And of course, a beef organ complex was very high on the list. But I looked at, the beef organ complexes on the market, and I realized, well, they have, if in any brand really, they have the same amount of liver and, heart and spleen and kidney and pancreas. And going back to that question from from your audience, but if you look at an animal, there are different ratios of those organ weights. So I'm like, well, having one organ complex that has the same amount of every single organ, even though they have a different size in the animal, doesn't really make sense. And then looking at the micronutrient composition of all those different organs, I figured, well, heart and spleen, those two together really give you the second biggest bang for your buck, because they cover a lot of the things that liver has in lesser amounts, maybe. In particular, heme iron. You mentioned before, anemia. So spleen is the best, supplement for that. And so by putting heart and spleen together, you get 48% of your daily iron, and a lot of the other things that are in that are in liver, but to a lesser extent. And so heart and spleen was the second product. And then I'm like, well, what else is there missing that most people, especially those who don't consume dairy or bone-in fish, like if, sardines and stuff, or that, people who don't like to chew on bones, what are they potentially deficient in? And, calcium and some of those trace minerals was a big thing. And so coming up with bone and marrow was the next obvious choice, to have the bone component. If you eat nose to tail, you can find the muscle meat, not a problem. You eat whatever you want to. Then you get the organs, the beef and heart, the liver and the heart and spleen. And then you add the bone and marrow, and then that completes. Of course, there are many organs missing, but the biggest components you've covered with that, from the animal. And so that was the third product. And then the last one was finally, well, an organ mix actually does make a lot of sense. If you only want to take one and you don't have any specific issues, like, if you're not anemic, if you don't need extra iron, if you don't need extra vitamin A, if you don't need extra, this and that, then an organ mix makes a lot of sense. But instead of, doing the same thing that many of the other brands did, with just the same amount for each of the individual organs, we actually did it so that it reflects the natural ratios of those organs in the animal. So it's a lot of liver, it's a little bit less heart, a little bit less kidneys, 2 kidneys combined, because they weigh more than the spleen. And then the last one is the pancreas, which, from those 5, it's the smallest organ. And so we put the ratios in our product that mimics the animal. And so if you want to truly do nose to tail, and you have your muscle meat covered and you have your bone and marrow covered, you pop the beef organs and you have, your nose to tail eating approach.
That's so cool. And it's something, because like I said, I've been taking organ supplements on and off for years and years. And that is something I never saw with any of the other brands, them talking about the natural ratios. So that's so cool. And so, yeah, so for people, like, because Laura was saying that she needed a clean source of iron, and you just touched on it right now. But for people who are struggling with iron, so the spleen is more the route to go compared to the liver.
Yes. A lot of people have had success with liver. There is, in an ounce of liver, you get 8 to 10 % of your daily iron needs. But if you're really severely anemic or have, higher requirements for whatever reason, spleen is definitely my recommendation over liver.
Awesome. And then I'm really interested in the bone and marrow supplement, especially because there's so much debate and controversy surrounding calcium absorption and, how to get it in its most absorbable form. So have you found that in that whole foods form, it's absorbable for people?
I would argue so. If our human history and evolution, if that's what you believe in, is any indication, then, we would have gotten our calcium likely from, ripping the meat off bones and, eating some bone fragments, maybe, by consuming whole fish, including, the fish bone and everything in it. Maybe also, the water was better. If you look at, a high quality European spring water, for example, and compare it, the mineral composition with tap water in the United States, excluding all of the toxins that are in tap water, but just the mineral content is nowhere near what you would get from natural spring water. And so, I think our modern lives are just not very conducive to, getting all of those minerals in, trace amounts or in higher amounts. And I think with any micronutrient, really, I would argue that coming from animal is the most bioavailable and readily absorbable form. Most of the nutrients, and all of them in reality, are equally or better absorbed from animals than from plants.
What water do you guys drink at your house?
So we have a multi-stage filtration system in our home. So what we drink on a daily basis gets first filtered by a whole house filtration system that takes out most everything. And then we have, and that's water I think is really perfectly fine to drink. And then we have several reverse osmosis with remineralization cartridges systems under various sinks that first strip the water of everything and then add some of the minerals back. But I would say that if you have access to clean spring water and it doesn't come in plastic bottles, that's probably even better. And not probably, it is better than having the cleanest filtered water and then having to put some of those trace minerals back in, because you're not going to be able to put everything back in that's part of natural water.
I live in an apartment right now, but one reason I would love to be somewhere more permanent is so that I could outfit my house with all that filtration. I actually get, if people don't notice, Whole Foods has a Whole Foods line of glass bottle mineral water, and it's pretty affordable. So I pretty much drink that as my daily go-to. It's funny, when I travel, the first thing I do is I go to Whole Foods and I get like so much water, and it's so heavy. I'll have like my massive suitcase and then just pounds and pounds of water, or liters.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that in this country, having access to truly clean and healthy drinking water is a main challenge.
I know. It's really, really unfortunate. We have a good question from Andrea as well. And you kind of touched on this as well, but she was wanting to know, is there a gold standard for supplementing, or does it really depend on the particular nutrient you need? Are there any, quote, rules when it comes to supplementing? And I know you mentioned that, if people have specific issues or, specific nutrient deficiencies, that they can favor one or the other, and then they can go the organ blend route if not. But are there any rules when it comes to supplementing with grass-fed supplements, organ supplements?
Yeah, I would say the rule is to supplement as little as possible and get most of your nutrients from, whole foods. Supplements, are meant to bridge any gaps that are either difficult or sometimes impossible to mitigate, just because we want to live a certain, way of life, a certain lifestyle. And, most of us don't want to run around in the wild in a loincloth, and hunt animals and find, food in the wild. So, there's always you have to kind of see how far you're willing to go and what you can, bridge with supplements. And as far as organs are concerned, again, you can find fresh organs, in a lot of places. Whole Foods now even sells, grass-fed liver. Had a little freezer compartment, funny enough, right next to the Beyond Burger thing there. And so you can get that. They sell marrow bones. There's a lot of things you can get fresh. If you go to an Indian, grocery store, you likely find, goat organs. But if that's not your thing, or, convenience is more important than, preparing and dealing with taste and texture, then indeed there is nothing significantly wrong with you that you're aware of. I would go with a mix that has, a couple of different organs to mimic, what you would find in the animal, and then see how you respond, see how you feel. Ultimately, and everyone is a little bit different. Everyone has different, deficiencies, different lifestyle, different, diet, different micronutritional needs based on stress levels and exercise regimen, and all of the things that make up our modern life. So it's a little bit of a trial and error. But I would say, if you buy one or use one supplement, beef organ supplement that is, then do an organ complex or liver. If budget is a concern and you want to get the least expensive route, make it liver and see how you feel. Does
your wife ever cook hide organ meats in with hamburger meat or anything like that? I know that's a route people go.
Yes, yeah, that's we've done this a couple of times with meatballs, and you just have to figure out, what ratio works for the adults versus for kids. Kids seem to be a little bit more suspicious when it comes to off flavors, so you probably have to play with it. I would start with very little and then increase the ratio. But yeah, that's something we've been doing as well. There is also, liverwurst. You mentioned it before. If that's a good product, a minimally processed product, that's better than no liver. There is pate, if you like it. I love it with cheese, so you can make it at home. It's fairly easy, or you can buy it. Just make sure, it has decent ingredients and no added, sugars and all kinds of stuff that you don't want to have. But there are different ways of sneaking it in if neither the supplement nor the fresh or, raw route is calling your name.
This is a tangent random question. I'm just getting hit with, so talking to you about these foods, I'm getting hit with so many, because like I said, my grandmother was German and I have so much family in Germany. And so these are the type of food conversations we would have in my family growing up, especially when we would go to Germany. I forgot, which part of Germany are you from?
I'm actually Austrian, so I'm just across the border from Salzburg, which is bordering to Bavaria.
Okay, gotcha. Similar vibe for, for everything. Are your kids bilingual?
Yeah, actually trilingual because my wife's Costa Rican, so she speaks Spanish with them and I German, and then the English is just based on where we live.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool. I feel like that's a skill I always wish that I had.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I had English. I had 4 years of French, and I did absolutely not pay any attention whatsoever, couldn't care less. And now when I, land in Paris, I'm like, I can pick up like individual words or whatever, and I wish I would have paid attention. But
yeah, same. I took French. I think I could, like if I were to go to France, I could read enough to get by, but beyond that, it's not good. Do you travel with your family overseas?
Yeah, we travel. I mean, the last 3 years, 4 years, what has it been? Less, obviously. Generally speaking, we do travel quite a bit, typically once a year to Costa Rica and then once a year to Austria. Sometimes the kids and the wife go more often to Costa Rica, and my family and her family come here every so often. So we do get around quite a bit, fortunately.
Do you find when you go to Austria, for example, because I know growing up for me, we would go to Germany all the time. The food, I didn't really like it over there. Like it felt really foreign to me and intense, and I didn't like the flavors. Have you found that your kids, since you raised them, differently here, do they like the food over there, or do they also find barriers to it?
No, they actually love it. I mean, everywhere we go, be it Costa Rica or Austria, I mean, really anywhere we go, they always like the food. Of course, there might be certain, if you take them to Asia and, you feed them, I don't know, snake or whatever, they might not like that. But beyond that, just, regular type of foods, westernized kind of foods, they do like very much, especially, both my mom's and my wife's mom, their cooking, they absolutely love and always rave about how good the food at, grandma or Oma is.
It's like with your supplements, do you take them with food or do you take them apart from food?
Honestly, I mean, I usually take them with food. I don't really think it makes a huge difference. I mean, if you're fasting and you're very anal about it, you could argue that the 2 grams of protein in the 4 capsules break your fast and, kick you out of autophagy and all of those things. Practically, I don't think it makes a difference. But since I don't see the need taking them before, I have my first meal. So I usually take them with my first meal. And if I forget, and then, I take them with at dinner or right before going to bed because I forgot for the second meal too, then, I do that. So I don't really have any rhyme or reason on my supplement timing.
Do you take them, if you were to have a meal out, would you bring them with you or would you just have them at home?
No, I have them at home. And sometimes when I travel for shorter periods, like, if I'm gone for 3 days or whatever, I might not bring them at all because, the thing is, routines are nice. Having access to all the good things all the time is nice, but not having it, I consider a hormetic stressor. I mean, we didn't have food every single. Our ancestors didn't walk up to the fridge and had a grass-fed ribeye and organs and everything at their disposal all the time. Sometimes there was no food. Sometimes there was crappy food. Sometimes they had to eat nuts and seeds or some fibrous tuber or whatever to get by. And so I kind of like to mimic that and keep it interesting, so to say, and not fall into a routine that would not be realistic from an ancestral perspective.
Do you think we could make the argument that having the occasional junk food meal is a hormetic stress?
It definitely is a stress. I'm not convinced that I think it's a benign stress if you have it occasionally. I don't think it's a necessary stress though either. But there's you could absolutely say that. I mean, if you say, cold plunging, exposure to, freezing cold temperatures is a good stressor. then why not, smoking a cigarette once a month, or inhaling, fume from an open fire, or whatever, it might be. There is an argument to be made. Here is my thing though. In our modern lives, we're exposed to so many stressors that we cannot mitigate or remove. So adding additional stressors on top, unless they are very, curated and particularly or chosen for a very good reason, I don't think is a smart idea. And that really also goes back to, some of the good stressors like exercise. I used to work out every single day. Now I work out maximum 3 times a week. I haven't, lost any strength. My physique doesn't look any different. I'm not, from a cardiovascular perspective, not in any worse condition than I ever was. I'm actually stronger and fitter than I ever was. Same goes with cold plunging. If you're already stressed out and on the edge, and then jumping into a cold plunge and telling your body, you're about to die in freezing cold water, might not be a super smart idea. Not saying that cold plunging cannot have benefits, but you have to use those things strategically, and you have to really figure out and assess, how is my stress level, and does it make sense to do this right now? Or is it better that I stay home, I don't go work out, and I sleep 2 hours longer instead of, exposing myself to all those good stressors that just put me farther over the edge?
100%. I could not agree more about the sleep thing in particular. Is it CrossFit that you're still doing the few times a week?
Uh-huh. I mean, that's my, my gym type of exercise. But here, at home, I walk the dog usually twice a day. That's at 1.5 hours of just walking at a fairly, decent pace. I lift feed bags, I construct, buildings for the animals and stuff. So I'm physically active really throughout the day, every single day. But redlining or pushing myself to my limit is typically, 2, max 3 times a week.
Speaking of sleep, are any of the organ supplements, do they contain melatonin?
No, they do not.
Like, would there be an organ supplement that would contain melatonin?
If you were, maybe a brain supplement, or isn't it a pineal gland that the melatonin is produced?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, like, I've never seen a pineal gland organ supplement before.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you have maybe a whole brain or something like this, and you whatever hormones are produced in that particular gland or organ, then you would get some of that for sure. I mean, it's the same way as you get testosterone by consuming testicles, or thyroid hormones by consuming thyroid tissue. So yes, I think that might actually make a lot of sense in the context also that the body produces only so much melatonin. And if I remember correctly, I just had a podcast interview with Dr. Kirk Parsley, and I think he mentioned that the human body at least produces 6 micrograms of melatonin as part of the circadian rhythm and winding down in the evening. The supplements that you would find over the counter is 1 milligram to 10, or there are even 50 milligrams of melatonin. Now, given not all of that is absorbed, but even if half of the 1 milligram is absorbed, that's still 500 times more than what your body would make. So I'd argue that an organ supplement that naturally contains melatonin in the appropriate amount. Now, maybe that a cow produces more, or I don't even know if a cow produces melatonin, I suspect, but who knows? But let's assume the animal produces melatonin, and it's somewhat in the same amount as humans. Then I think it would be the preferred way of delivering melatonin. If you need that to, I don't know, because you're traveling across time zones and you need to, adjust your circadian rhythm or whatever, or your sleep cycle, I should say, you cannot adjust your circadian rhythm. So yeah, I think there is an argument for that. But ours, as far as I know, don't have any melatonin.
That's so interesting because I've never seen a pineal gland organ supplement. I'm going to have to think about this some more.
I'm not sure if that is being harvested separately and freeze-dried.
I don't even know how big the pineal gland is.
I wouldn't even know exactly where to look for it, in terms of, if I see it in front of me, I probably wouldn't recognize it. But you know what? First time we'll butcher a cow, I'll go look for it.
Oh, yeah, please do. Let me know. Oh, my goodness. It's so funny. Wait, so do you have a podcast, or does Kirk have a podcast now?
Well, he does not have one. And he said he will probably never will. But yes, I have the Primal Shift podcast. I've started last year. So we are now in, what is it, episode 30 something? Still fairly new. Very much focused on, bridging the gap between our ancestral kind of, how we should be living versus what our modern lives allows us to, and kind of, mesh that together into something that is actually doable, especially in the context of a family. And that's, what my podcast is focused on.
Oh, that's super cool. I'll have to check it out. That's amazing. And yeah, I've had Kirk on the show. I don't know. I know him really well. So like 4 or 5 times. And I was like, I don't think he has a podcast. So that's super, super awesome. Would you ever make a brain supplement? Speaking of.
Yes, I mean, really, I'd like to have every single organ. The thing is, with bootstrapping everything, and doing everything from scratch and growing organically without any, external funding, I can only, launch maybe 2 products a year or so. And so we are in the planning phase of the next product. I'm actually still awaiting feedback from our existing customer base, which is now, a couple of thousand, fortunately. So we've been growing really well. And so I'm waiting what they have to say, what they'd like to see, and then see how that meshes with what I'd like to see and how I think we can, keep the brand growing so we can then do the next thing. But there is one coming out hopefully in the next 3 months, and then probably another one by the end of the year. And brain is on the list. I love brain. Obviously, there are, again, I think brain is right up in the category as thyroid. All the concerns about BSE and mad cow disease and all of those things, it's always a little iffy, especially if you want to ship internationally. But nevertheless, I do absolutely think brain supplements, consuming brain should be a no-brainer. Pun intended.
No pun intended. Was this your first product brand that you created?
Yes. I mean, besides, my, Michael Kummer brand, if you will, that I haven't really, I didn't really start the brand. It was just that everything was, all my blogging stuff was in my name. And so it kind of naturally became the brand. But the real, brand, especially with the physical product, MK Supplements was the first one.
I did the same thing with having my name in the title. I'm just wondering if you have been experiencing, like for me, it was so exciting to launch my first supplement. And then I was just like, the world is my oyster. Like I want to make all the things. I just really enjoy the process. Do you enjoy the process?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, creating something. I mean, back in the days I was in IT, so and I, dabbled a little bit with, writing software and stuff. And it's kind of the same principle. You do something, you create something, and then it exists, and people want it, and people buy it, and they, give you feedback, sometimes bad, but mostly good. And you reiterate, you improve, and it's awesome. I mean, it's I think we're all creators by nature, and then finding an outlet and finding a way that allows you to make a living from that is absolutely priceless.
It's so exciting. I don't know if you remember like the first moment of having your supplement, crystallized in real life form, but I was like, wow, it's so crazy that it goes from like an idea in your head to this, physical thing. It was a moment for me with my first one.
Yeah, I still have the screenshot of the first notification from Shopify when the first order came in. I mean, that was really, that was the thing. I'm like, oh yeah, we're in business. And then it took a while for the second order, but nevertheless, the first one was exciting.
Just got to keep on keeping on. Is the actual, because I know the sourcing is New Zealand, is the creation of the capsules and everything in New Zealand as well, or is it over here in the US?
That's here in New York. So we get basically drums of the raw powder shipped in. I mean, they are, realistically, they are, there is the company that they are the ranchers, it's usually, as part of a co-op where they, they ranch together and then, sell their products to a freeze dryer. They freeze dry everything according to specifications. And then an importer here in the US, does all the custom stuff, imports it here. And then we buy them from the importer, and do the manufacturing here. Not complicated, but, there are a couple of steps in between that you want to, be aware of and keep an eye on.
When you have your cattle, will you freeze dry yourself any of those organs?
Yes. I mean, it's not going to be enough to, make supplements because, again, there's only one liver in a cow. But we definitely will freeze dry, just from a, not paranoia, but being prepared perspective. Like we had, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, maybe, 3 days of power outage and, suddenly, then during the pandemic, toilet paper was gone for, I don't know why, because people apparently poop more when they can't go to the office. And so we want to keep like some food in stock, our own food. So if there is an outage or whatever, we have, we have access to that stuff. And so freeze drying is going to be one of the things that we'll be doing, with meat in general, but also with organs.
Yeah, that's something I really recommend to listeners because I have a chest freezer that I think I actually ordered it on Amazon. Like, because I remember before I got one, I was like, well, that sounds like a big deal to get an entire separate chest freezer. But it fits so nicely in my apartment. It's like not too big, but I can fit so much meat in there. So I really recommend that to people.
Yep, just make sure you have some sort of, backup in case the power goes out, because we had at the time 2 chest freezers and we had to move them to France when the power didn't come back after 2.5 days and they were starting to thaw. And so now we have, fortunately, solar panels with battery backup, so we can, sustain any power outage. We won't even notice it. But at the time, there was a concern. And actually then, funny enough, we got the freezers back. I put everything back together, was happy that the meat survived. And then accidentally forgot to turn one of the freezer chests on. And a couple of weeks later, I had a puddle of blood underneath and we lost probably $1,000 worth of grass-fed meat. And I'm like, okay, that was a mistake that we shall not repeat.
Not make that one again. Oh my goodness. Wow. And was it difficult to outfit with the solar panels?
No, I mean, we got him from Tesla. They did everything. I mean, it's not an easy process because there's a lot of, red tape and bureaucracy. We're actually among the first few customers of Tesla because, the whole, can you connect solar power and can you then sell excess energy back to the grid and all of that? The Georgia Power needs to improve. The municipality needs to improve. In our case, in the city of Milton, and it was a whole project spanned over, I think, a year or so. So it took forever. Maybe now it's quicker. I hope it is, but it was quite involved. But the actual installation process was fairly straightforward. I mean, they knocked it out in maybe 2 days, set everything up, and good to go.
Wow. Is that something that they're looking to roll out more, assuming that it gets through with legalities and stuff?
I think so. I mean, the one thing to keep in mind is, there are certain areas in this country that benefit more from solar than Georgia, because here power is relatively inexpensive, and sun is not as prevalent, or at least not at the right angles, than maybe in California. And so I want to say that from a return of investment perspective, I doubt that it's worth it here in Georgia. In particular, maybe on our roof, because our roof is not facing the south. So we are east and west. And so we had to kind of, take a hit on that. If your house is perfectly aligned, a roof line to the south and, et cetera, it might be worth it. But for us, it was more like a, backup kind of thing. In case there is an outage, we are not affected. That was what we were willing to pay for, rather than, making money with solar or having zero electricity bill.
So in the future, when this is more readily available, if people have the right roofs and everything, you can actually, you said you sell back the power?
Yeah. I mean, again, it depends on the jurisdiction, how much they pay you for, because very often they don't pay you what you pay the electricity for. So they pay you less than what you pay to get it. So, but there, I mean, I know that in Austria, I mean, completely different jurisdiction, obviously, but there are a lot of people who started out making a lot of money putting on solar panels on their roof because electricity is so expensive and they produced so much that they actually made a lot of money every single month by just, selling back to the grid. Now they're changing the laws, and now all of those might get pissed off because, they have an investment that doesn't make any money or not as much. But again, it depends on your, if you're in California, high, energy cost, etc., might be worth it. In Florida or here, might not be worth it. So you really have to, do the numbers, crunch the numbers, and see if it makes sense. But yes, the possibility does exist.
That's super cool. I'm so inspired. Oh my goodness. Is there any other cool little techniques that you implement into your family's life that people can adopt into their own life to make it more, combat the stressors of our modern lifestyles?
I mean, the big thing is, I believe, is to get comfortable doing a lot of things differently than most everyone else. That's the most challenging part of all of that, because healthy living or living healthily is not rocket science. It's super easy, but incredibly difficult to implement. And so if you learn to be uncomfortable by just being different, I think that's a major thing. And, doing less. I mean, for us, homeschooling the kids, or we actually unschool them, so we don't have a fixed curriculum, but taking them out of the grind. I mean, I took myself out of the grind when I, quit my day job and pursued the supplements business and the blogging business and, all of that. And my wife has always been a stay-home mom. So by removing yourself from the grind, it's a major de-stressor. And the less you're stressed, I believe that the more capable your body is to deal with all of the other things. To handle maybe foods that might not be ideal for you or less than ideal. And environmental toxins and everything. But the more you get out of the grind, the more you get your head clear and can make, really decisions based on what you think is right versus what everyone else does. And you kind of feel like you have to tag along because otherwise you're going to be the odd man out or odd woman out. I think that has been for us a real game changer. And the more you get out, the more eye-opening it is looking, at what's going on from the outside. Not, we're not conspiracy theorists or anything, but just looking at what's happening and the state of health everyone is in and how we are doing now and what we are doing to maintain that health, it's day and night. And it's not a struggle for us to do that. We thoroughly enjoy doing that. Of course, nothing is perfect. There are struggles everywhere. But in comparison, it's so much better, just doing things a little bit differently and finding a group of people that are also doing things differently. And so you don't feel like you're the only one.
This is so empowering. I so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. You are so kind. So listeners, if you would like to get your own MK supplements, again, cannot recommend it enough, especially after hearing all of this conversation. You can see why these are really, really could be an incredible tool in your dietary arsenal to, fill in those nutritional gaps that we might have with today's diet. So you can use the coupon code Melanie Avalon. That will get you 15% off site-wide. And that will also, if you get a subscription, which his subscriptions are 10% off, that will get you 15% off that first order as well. So that's definitely a route to go. I highly recommend that.
One more thing to mention, because that's something we run often into, is we offer free shipping domestically if the order value is $100 after discounts and before taxes. And we have a lot of customers that enter in a subscription and say, well, but I don't need, 3 bottles, let's say, to get over that threshold. And of course, with a subscription, you can set your delivery schedule to whatever you want it to be. Initially, you have to pick, I think, 45, 90, or 135 days. And, our supplements last for 45 days. But after that, once you've, signed up or purchased, you can go in, log in, and change it to 300 days or whatever you want to, so that you can get more product, free shipping, including the discount. And then you don't end up with more product than you can actually end up using,
Awesome. So definitely go that subscription route. That is awesome. And again, the coupon code is Melanie Avalon and the website is shop.michaelcoomer.com. So that's shop.michael, Michael, Coomer, Kummer.com. And we will put links to all of that in the show notes as well. Any other links that you like to put out there for people to follow your work?
Yeah, if you remove the shop dot, then you end up on my blog. That's where I put out, most of my content. I have also a YouTube channel in my name that you should be, able to find. I'm on Instagram. If you're interested in homesteading or those kind of things, we have a Coomer Homestead YouTube channel as well as a Coomer Homestead Instagram. So if that's your jam, follow us there and check us out so you can get a kind of an idea of what it takes to grow some of your own food. It's always fun, and always a learning experience. So those are, I think, the resources I would like to share.
Awesome. Well, we'll put links to all of that in the show notes. And it's just so cool. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about your supplements or anything else that the listeners should know?
No, if you have any questions, reach out to us. There's a contact page on the shop as well as on my blog, or mike@michaelcoomer.com if you want to shoot me an email. If you have any questions, more than happy to help. Not trying to sell you stuff you don't need. Fresh is always best. So, but, we got you covered if you don't like the taste or texture of organs.
Awesome. Well, the last question that I ask every single guest on this show, and it's just because I realize more and more each day how important mindset is. So what is something that you're grateful for?
To be having the opportunity, of doing what I'm doing. That's really, I wake up not every morning, but a lot of mornings, and I'm like, I get to choose what I do today. Most people don't. And I also, in that, so that's what I'm grateful for. But at the same time, I think with the right mindset, because you brought it up, you can get there as well, and it's, for me, it was all about, visualizing where I want to be, and visualizing more. I think that's maybe the most important part, visualizing how I will feel once I've accomplished whatever I wanted to accomplish. So feeling already how it will be, hopefully in the future, tricks your mind into thinking that event has already happened. And it sets you up mentally from getting from where you are to where you want to be.
I love that so much. I'd heard something about that psychology-wise that, feeling certain feelings, like the time part of your brain doesn't know if it's happening now or then. So, wow. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This has been so amazing. I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and I'm really excited to see, the continued evolution of the supplements and everything that you are doing, and can't wait to hear listeners' feedback from this episode because this was just so, so fun. So again, for listeners, go to shop.michaelcoomer.com. Use the coupon code Melanie Avalon to get 15% off site-wide, including 15% off that first subscription order, free shipping over $100. Yeah, well, thank you for your time. This has been so amazing. Hopefully we can meet up sometime since we're in similar locations. I know you're in Milton, so it's far. It's a bit ways out.
We're going to be even farther out than in the future, but right now, yes, we're in Milton. Maybe one more thing before I forget, maybe, primalshiftpodcast.com. That's maybe the other thing I would, like to point people to. The Primal Shift Podcast.
Primal Shift Podcast. Okay, awesome. I'll have to check that out. Super cool. Where are you guys moving with the move?
We're going to be up in the area of Manlow, Somerville, which is north of Rome. Not sure if you're familiar with, but it's literally 1 mile away from the state line to Alabama, and about a couple of miles north of us would be Tennessee. So it's all the way up there in the corner.
Okay, wow. That's quite a move. Oh my goodness. Are you going to move all the animals with you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, where they are in their life cycle, if it makes sense to put them in the freezer or bring them. I mean, the bees likely we're going to bring. The chickens we'll see. If they're still laying, then we'll, ship them up. But yeah, that's going to be a major project that we are very much looking forward to, as the next segment of our lives.
Wait, so the bees, when you move them, are they okay with that? Or do they I just know I was listening to a Joe Rogan episode and he was talking about how, I guess they were doing an episode of Fear Factor and they brought in bees for some competition and the bees had to not fight it out, but they had to deal with a local bee colony and converse and establish themselves. I just don't know, moving bees. Have you researched that yet?
Yeah, so it's not that of a big deal. I mean, what bees do is they orient themselves by landmarks and how the sun is and how the sun looks, etc. So they are very skilled navigators. And so when you move them a certain distance away from where they currently are, then they will have to reorient themselves. So what they do is, they come out. Let's say if you move them at night, which is the ideal, or in winter when they are not active, when they're all in the hive. You move them, you pack them up, you move them. When they first come out, they'll realize, whoops, I don't know where I am. And so they start doing those orientation flights and tell everyone else, where there's food, where there's water, etc. And so that takes a little bit of adjustment. Obviously, if there are colonies nearby, I don't think they're gonna, there is something like robbing where they, one hive would attack the other. But usually when there are enough resources, that's not really an issue.
Oh my goodness. So many things you don't ever think about. It's so cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been so delightful, and I wish you the best with everything that you're doing, and hopefully we can talk again in the future.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast. For more information, you can check out my book, What When Wine? Lose weight and feel great with paleo-style meals, intermittent fasting, and wine, as well as my blog, melanieavalon.com. Feel free to contact me at podcast@melanieavalon.com. And always remember, you got this.